This is undoubtedly the most expensive and technically equipped aircraft of the Russian Federation.
The cost of the complex, including the aircraft and equipment, is estimated at $300 to $330 million.
The Russians often love to praise it, such as
the eyes and ears of the Russian air fleet.
And to shoot it down, the Ukrainians. Our Air Force has already managed to land 2 such aircraft.
These are its wings. What wings? It's empty inside.
The strategic reconnaissance aircraft AWACS, A-50. What do the Russians use this aircraft for? What have the Ukrainian armed forces learned to shoot it down with? And what is the impact of losing each such aircraft? This is what we'll discuss today in Arsenal. The A-50 is a Soviet-Russian airborne early warning and control aircraft created based on the Il-76, the transport aircraft. It is essentially a flying reconnaissance aircraft capable of seeing even beyond the horizon and quickly transmitting information to the troops.
In fact, it's a flying command post that manages all aviation activities in the area it controls. There. It is equipped with a radar system, a radar in a rotating antenna that can survey, well, in this case, our Ukrainian territory, to a depth of, if we're talking about aerial targets, up to 500 kilometers. And it can even distinguish ground targets, such as tank columns, at a distance of up to 200 kilometers, and anti-aircraft installations at even shorter distances. Therefore, the aircraft is very dangerous.
Its development commenced in the year 1969 as a replacement for the outdated predecessor based on the Tu-126 Sina. It took almost a decade for the designers to assemble the aircraft and get it airborne. This first happened in 1978. During this time, most of the testing focused on the surveillance equipment. After all, the aircraft itself had long been in service. 3 Il-76 were equipped for this use, on which experiments were conducted mainly to improve the radar, electronic warfare systems, and other technical components. In 1990, the A-50 was finally commissioned. In 2003, it was decided to modernize the Soviet legacy. Thus, the A-50U, meaning upgraded, was born. There, in particular, the radar complex, a control system, and communication complex were updated. Displays were replaced with monitors, and in the operator's compartment, a rest area and buffet were even arranged. It was in this configuration that the A-50s encountered the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. These aircraft played an extremely important role for the Russians, as flying from the side of the Russian Federation and Belarus, they regularly recorded the maneuvers of our forces, the locations of air defense systems, and other strategic information.
For example, the A-50 can scout the movements of our armored units, right? Instantly transmitting to the Il-22 on board, and the Il-22 then manages the actions of the Russian armed forces.
However, they couldn't fly with impunity for long. For the first time, the A-50 fleet suffered losses in February of last year. At that time, while based in Belarus, during a stop at the Machulishchi airport, it received an unpleasant surprise from local partisans in the form of a drone.
The very plane that was blown up is the newest plane. It was delivered to the Russian Aerospace Forces on December 29th, 2021. In fact, 2 months before the start of the war.
But to damage does not mean to destroy, thought our special services. And this year, they presented a new concept for combating the A-50. On the old New Year, over the Sea of Azov, the A-50U, AWACS, was sent to the bottom.
After the loss of the cruiser Moskva, in terms of financial and human resources, yes, this is the most serious loss since the start of the war.
because this time they managed to hit an even newer plane. It was actually put into operation during the full-scale war.
The very latest upgraded A-50U aircraft. There are 16 people on board. The cost, back in Soviet times, was $280 million. Now, with modernization, it approaches somewhere around $500 million. There you go. So, in both respects, it's an extremely expensive machine. And the main thing for the Russians is that they have few of them.
Moreover, the crash into the sea completely deprived the Russian Federation of the opportunity to somehow use the surviving multi-million-dollar components, which, under sanctions, are no longer available to the Russians.
If the plane crashes into the sea, then at best there are just the body and debris beneath it.
The operation was repeated for an encore a month later, on February 23rd, Defender of the Fatherland Day. A precise shot brought down another A-50U.
Damn.
Oh, we hit it, we hit it!
Yeah!
Can you just imagine? Where will it fall?
That's the wing. Such a wing. Center, empty inside. Its name, 343A Udell, on the weight of RV.
According to expert estimates, just on these two planes alone, in less than 2 months, Russia could have lost about $1 billion, especially considering the need to train as new crews.
With modernization, each of these planes can cost up to $500 million. That's 10 times more than any regular transport aircraft. That's several times more expensive than the most costly Russian strategic bomber, like the Tu-160.
So what secret weapon did Ukraine use in the fight against the flying reconnaissance aircraft? The downing of the planes clearly occurred with the help of an anti-aircraft missile system. In January, analysts believed the Patriot was used against the A-50. And in February, Ukraine likely used its own weaponry.
The main theory is the use of the S-200 system. There you go. The so-called Angara. With the help of missiles that destroy targets up to 250 kilometers. If we are discussing the Angara S-200 system, it targets the destruction of AWACS aircraft.
It is also difficult to overestimate the military loss for Russia from the loss of these aircraft. The A-50 flight routes will now have to be moved further away from the Ukrainian border. This will allow, for example, the long-suffering airfield in Starokostiantiniv to finally be out from under the watchful eye of Russian air radars, and possible sorties from there, as well as strikes against the enemy, will become much more unexpected for the adversary.
Now the Russians will not be able to provide round-the-clock radar surveillance of our territory in such a way as to cover the entire perimeter of the combat operations. That is, they will now have these gaps in their air defense. We will be able to track these gaps and deliver more significant strikes through them with fewer losses of our strike assets from their air defense.
Speaking of air defense, in the next episode, we will tell you how the Ukrainians managed to modernize the S-200 complex and what these Soviet missiles are capable of today. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes of Arsenal